Welcome to Writer's Digest Presents. Hosted by the editors of Writer's Digest, this monthly podcast features conversations with writing and publishing experts whose insights will help ignite your creative vision, hone your skills, build your platform, and get your work out into the world.
Hello, everyone. I'm content editor Michael Woodson, and welcome to Writer's Digest Presents. Today, we're discussing social media and its influence on the publishing industry at large. Social media influence has been steadily on the rise across industries, and publishing has certainly seen that as well. What makes a book popular and popular on social media? How do influencers choose what books to showcase? How do they navigate their shifting tastes and preferences? And what happens if they want to branch out and pursue other creative endeavors? Joining me today in this conversation are three people with immense social media followings in the book and publishing sphere: Janelle Lee, Dawnche Reed, and Chip Pons. So first, I just want to kick off by asking sort of broadly, what were your relationships with reading and books before social media? Janelle, why don't we start with you?
I've been a lifelong reader, but in my adult life, I would say I haven't had the time to until the good old pandemic. And so reading became kind of my main hobby because I live in an apartment by myself, and my friends and I kind of started out with a book club as our way to make sure we're connecting with each other once a month. And from there, I guess I just have a little bit of an obsessive personality, and it kind of just waterfalled. And I read pretty heavily for about a year before I joined Bookstagram social media. And it was mostly just because I wanted to have one, I'm always super hungry for a creative outlet. I'm just a very big creative at heart. And two, I was like, I'm reading all these books and I'm not writing any of my thoughts down. Let's do something about that. And I think when I started posting, I honestly didn't know about Bookstagram. I just already had a handle called Jan and Things that I would use for random creative things over the years. And so I was like, okay, let's see where this goes. I may or may not grow a following. And then it kind of just took off over time from there.
I love that. I feel like my situation is very similar to Janelle's. It was just I've always been a reader, my entire life, just a huge reader. And then the pandemic came around, and at that time I was living in Hawaii. And so I really felt isolated from everyone. And I had started my page, Intro to Eclecticism, under the same guise of just sharing all of the things that I was interested in at that time. And so I was really heavy into writing poetry and just sharing random thoughts, random things I was seeing on the island, and just books occasionally. And I didn't even know Bookstagram was a thing. And then I just randomly ended up on that side of the internet. And I was just like, oh, this is cool. This is a whole little community. I love it here. And so my page kind of converted to strictly books until recently.
Yeah, likewise. I remember the exact moment that I discovered Bookstagram was a thing, and I was like, wait, what? This has been here this whole time. But you both have mentioned, I grew up reading. Reading was always my favorite pastime in the car or on the plane. And when as I got older, the pandemic obviously helped, but I'd always traveled for work, and so I'd always make sure to grab a book before. And just I think my favorite place to read is on an airplane. And yeah, I started my Bookstagram account. I ended up starting a book club, Janelle, like you said, and it just became this essential part of who I am, and kind of my favorite part. And I've met so many incredible people through this book community that I have never met in real life, but I count them as some of my closest confidants and friends to this day.
I love you mentioned community, because a question I had for each of you is, well, Janelle, I think the first time I ever DM'd you was about Everything Everywhere All at Once, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, Stevie, choose one. And I someone who's sort of on the outside of watching Bookstagram, I struggle with do they want to hear from me? what is their
Yes.
relationship with DMs? And
Yes.
so that's my sort of opening up that question is like, what is your relationship with the community? Do you welcome sort of like that parasocial relationship and people like sort of being in your DMs and just chatting with you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I feel like y'all could probably relate, but I think that is kind of like what you just said, Chip. I've made so many friends through the internet, through Bookstagram that I haven't met in real life yet, or some I'm starting to now, which is really exciting. And it always just starts with a DM. A lot of times when I'm posting something, even still, I'm like, does anybody even care? Is anybody reading what I'm talking about? And so whenever there's a little bit of a validation through a message, I think that's really welcome.
Yeah, I've always had the mentality of like my DMs are always open to talk about books, to talk about whatever, you know, like it doesn't have to be even about books. And that's genuinely the best part of all of this. Like the people that I talk to on a daily basis, we're not talking about books anymore.
Sure.
We're talking about what's going on in our life. We're talking about TV shows we're watching. We're talking about work. We're talking about relationships. And, you know, books started it all. And that's what, you know, bonds us together. But it's really been something special.
Yeah, I agree with that because I think that's a big distinction between Bookstagram and then like other sides of the internet. I feel like a lot of people don't use their DMs or they're very hesitant. And I really welcome the fact that people will just randomly DM me. I'm a very shy person. So it's like sometimes I'm like, do I DM them? But when I'm on my Bookstagram, I'm just like, we're all DMing each other. Like, it doesn't matter. We love this. Like, we relate on that level. And it's the same way. Like, I've made a lot of great friendships just through Bookstagram. And now these are like people I call when like something's happening in my life, like with my daughter or anything like that. I'm just like, hey, guess what? And it's like, it's not about a book. And they love that.
Totally. So, well, Danche, you mentioned sort of other parts of the internet. You have a pretty big TikTok following, correct?
I think I just have a TikTok following. I wouldn't call it big. I feel like TikTok following in comparison to Instagram is just very different.
Yeah, that's what my question was going to be.
Yeah. I don't think the community is as tight knit. I think like there are people that follow you and then they never see your content again. Whereas on Instagram, like I'm seeing like the same people like quite often, especially in my DMs. And just like the way that it reaches and the way that it flows, like I can post more on TikTok, but I feel like on Instagram, it allows for more intimacy rather than just like, here's all my thoughts. And sometimes people engage, sometimes they don't. But on Instagram, they do.
Chip, your trajectory is an interesting one because you've started, correct me if I'm wrong, but you started more sort of from a Bookstagram angle, but actually you've been published. Your first novel, You and I Rewritten, came out in October 2022, and you have a second novel coming out in 2025.
Yeah.
So has publishing changed your goals at all with your social media presence? And congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. It's been like such an amazing experience, you know, going from literally discovering Bookstagram and like giving me the confidence to be like, oh, like maybe I can do this too. And so yes and no, publishing has like changed my relationship with social media because now I have a foot in each group. And it's a very awkward and privileged, but sometimes uncomfortable position to be in because I'm no longer a reader. And I don't always feel like a writer because my traditionally published book isn't coming out until 2025, like a year away. And so I'm not really supposed to be leaving reviews on other authors who I like am now really friendly with. Like, I'm not going to review their books. I'm not going to do anything really but promote myself, which feels icky because I love screaming about the books that I love. And I love, you know, taking photos and creating flat lays and taking part in the fun, you know, Bookstagram and BookTok challenges. And so I've really just kind of had to change how my account, like what the intent for my account is. And at the end of the day, like it's for me and it's like it's a source of like, it's a creative outlet. It's a source of happiness for me. And so like, I'm only going to do what's authentic to that, which is still scream about the books that I love, still try to post pretty pictures and find a way to promote myself along the
Yeah,
way.
totally. Yeah, because we tell our writers all the time, being online and being on social media is vital and it's important. It won't necessarily make or break your book sales or anything, but like having a presence is really important. So since, as you said, you are sort of straddling both these lines, what challenges do you see facing writers on breaking out on social media versus Bookstagram breaking out on social media? Like, trying to beat the algorithm or finding the right people who are going to be interested in the type of writing you're doing, that sort of thing.
I can't speak from personal experience for those like breakout viral moments, because I keep waiting for it to happen somewhere, like maybe. But I think the challenges are like feeling uncomfortable about promoting yourself, and also feeling like you're inconveniencing someone by like saying, hey, go buy my book. Because I found, and this is probably just like the whatever corner of the algorithm that I'm on, like anytime I push my stuff online, it like tanks. And anytime I like do more Bookstagram like fluff content, it like does really well. So I think people don't want to be sold. They want to be entertained. They want to be informed. They want to be involved in the process. So I actually just came back from like a big influencer, like a big book influencer event in New York, and I was with like 65 book talkers. And so it was just so fascinating to hear them talking about how like the types of author content that they like. And it's like, invite them into the process, show them what a day in your life is without constantly pitching your book, like finding those subtle ways to be like, oh, well, if you like this, like I'm working on a scene that involves, a first kiss in an elevator that gets stuck and blah, 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 and like kind of make them feel like they're along with the journey for you. Yeah. So I just think that the challenges are feeling like you're feeding people too much of yourself and your book and what you're trying to sell without having fun with it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Then, like it starts to feel like a job, and that's just like, it is a job, but it's also the fun part of the job.
Well, no, I mean, that's a really great point. Do any of you, what is your relationship with it being I don't know how any of you do it. Like I dabbled in like possibly doing Bookstagram stuff like right before COVID. And then in COVID, I really found Bookstagram in COVID as well. Cause it was just like, I'm lonely and sad and scared. Give me the books. And like, I was exhausted from even just like barely doing it myself. And just like the pressure to keep posting and pressure to post certain kinds of things. And it really, it maybe isn't a job, but it's hard work. And so I am curious, like, what is your relationship with this? Like, do you struggle with the joy versus the job?
I feel like now I struggle a bit with like the joy of it, and not really because of like just working my platform. Like I also have a full-time job that is also within the digital space. So I feel like I'm chronically online. And so it's very easy to get burnt out and kind of want to separate yourself. And so like, I can only imagine that like straddling the fence for you, Chip, because it's just like, I have to like try to figure out like for you, like how can I write my book while also being on social media? How can I stay on trend while also focusing on this separate thing? It's like always trying to keep your mind in two different places. So I think like right now for me, it's just like trying to get back to the root of why I started my Bookstagram. So I've been prioritizing a lot of just like last week, I bought books for the first time in a very long time because I often receive book mail, like from work and then just also other publishers. And so it felt so good to go back into the bookstore and say, oh, let me look at the shelves and find a book that I want to read, not something that was gifted to me, not something that was like shoved down my throat. Just like, here's what I like. Just reminding myself of the books that I like without any type of obligations to it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question that I ask myself a lot. The joy versus the job. I don't get paid for anything I do on Bookstagram, but I do also receive books every now and then. And honestly, that was my goal. Once I kind of established or understood what Bookstagram was, I was like, how cool would it be if I got free books? So I'm really happy and very lucky to have that. Um, and I do think more often than not, I'm the one putting pressure on myself. Like, I don't think there are really any external forces whenever I'm like, oh my goodness, like, what should my posting cadence be? I haven't shared anything in a while. Will people like this kind of thing? It's like, I don't think anyone else honestly is paying attention to that other than yourself. So that's the kind of like thing I need to remind myself. And I resonated a lot with what both of you said, even though I'm not a writer, Chip. I feel like in some ways I kind of straddle the line between like maybe I was thinking more from the side of I follow a lot of authors, and I'm very lucky that a lot of authors I love also follow me. And recently I have come into the space where I maybe don't like their sophomore novel, and I've hyped up so much of like their work before. I'm like, oh no, like I don't really want to share my honest opinion because I don't want you to hate me. So it's kind of like the line I'm towing is between like kind of my honest, authentic thoughts and why I started Bookstagram, just to like put my thoughts out there, and you know, also being respectful to the people I really respect. So I think that's been an interesting thing that I've been exploring and facing in the last couple months.
And I feel like that kind of ties back to the community discussion, because like, yes, you're a reader. Yes, you love reading books, but then like you get immersed in this awesome community where authors also want to be a part of it, and they like can become your friends. And it's like you engage with them online in their DMs. Sometimes it like translates to texting. Like I know authors and readers meet up at, like in their local area for coffee, and it's like, how do you then like, is it really a reader space, or are review spaces just for readers? And where do the authors get to fit in that? Like, especially once those lines get blurred, like it gets complicated, but it's, I don't know. It's lucky. We're lucky that we get to do it, but it's interesting.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like I never, like lately I've been so hesitant to post negative reviews, and I had to like ask my story. I was like, hey guys, like, do you all want to see these negative, do you want to see these negative reviews? Like, what should I do with them? Because it's like, not everyone on Instagram follows me on Goodreads, so they're not going to see whatever that star rating is. And then they're like, oh, did you ever finish XYZ book? And I'm just like, yeah, it was just kind of, and it's, and it's just like, I try to like not really throw the author like under the bus, because I want to be considerate of the fact of like, well, there's going to be other eyes that see it. So, you know, I'll be feeling that same type of pressure where it's just like, oh my gosh, like, how do I say that I did not like this book? How do I say it? And it's like, I just don't say it. So can I ask a question? Like, what do you all do? What do you all do when like you have a negative review? Do you just keep it to yourself, or do you share it like in feed?
For me, I, and this is truly just a me thing. Like, I think negative/honest reviews are very important. But for me, I just don't like wasting mental energy on things that I don't like. So like, if I read it and I didn't like it, like it just is instantly out of mind. And so I've never shared negative reviews. Like that's just not something that I like care to do. I'll talk about it with my friends, but publicly, like, especially now, I just don't do it because it's not worth it to me to have that on my platform.
Yeah,
I think you're so right. I do think it is important to have those honest reviews. And again, this also is something I've been thinking about lately, because I feel like I've been having a stream of not so great books, or just books I don't personally enjoy. And Don Shay, I feel like you and I actually had an exchange like a month or two ago, where I posted to my stories. I was like, why is everybody in love with this book? Is it just me, or is it the book? And a lot of people were like, it's the book. And I'm like, why have I not seen this online? Like, if I had known this, I maybe wouldn't have bought this book, which I feel horrible saying. And so things like that make me realize, like, yes, I want to now speak out about this book. So to spare somebody else from kind of wondering the same thing. And it's actually really funny. I posted like a recap of the books that I posted or that I read last month, and I blocked one of the authors because I didn't want her to see. It wasn't even that negative of a review, but I just didn't want her to see it because I really like her and I want to be her friend.
So I blocked her.
So I'm like gonna unblock her. I'm gonna unblock her in like a week when nobody cares about this post anymore.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
And this post is going to be your viral moment. It's going to recirculate right after
Totally.
This clip.
Well, this brings up an interesting like conversation about language, because I think it's interesting that we as book people have sort of centered like not liking something as a negative review or a negative thing. And I think it is totally a response to like the internet can be mean, and so a lot of times it moves in the direction of cruelty. When like if I don't like a book, that doesn't mean that it wasn't successful or actually bad. A lot of times it's just like kind of what publishers talk about a lot. If they reject a manuscript 9 times out of 10, it's not a bad manuscript, it's just not the right home for it. And so what I've learned in the last, I guess as a reader, is that most of the time a book isn't bad, it's just not for me. And if I can translate that with how I say it, like I do want to, because of what Janelle, what you're saying is I am not a bookstagrammer, so what am I talking about? No one knows this but like the people I talk to. But like if I don't like something, I tried to delicately to say like, you might like this, but like this is why I didn't, and you can decide for yourself. And because you seem to have similar concerns around the work you do as bookstagrammers, it does reveal to me that this has a place in the publishing industry. And so my question for you, it's kind of broad, but is like, what do you see as your role as bookstagrammers or bookfluencers in the publishing industry, and what do you want your role to be? Like what do you want the publishing industry to learn about what you guys know about books?
I think it's important to just remember that at the end of the day, we're readers and we want to promote or buy or like scream about the books that we love and like share them with our friends and family and like find that commonality. I don't think it's a reader's place to provide critique when they invite an author into that space, right? So like if you are going to tag an author in your review, I don't think that's your opportunity to like tell them what they should have done differently or like what didn't work for you. Like it's too late for that, right? The book's out, and nothing can be done. But at the end of the day, reviews are for readers. They're not for authors. And so authors don't need to be in those review spaces. And I think publishers need to understand that like people are embracing honesty and like they're not just going to buy into like one of my least favorite phrases, overhyped, right? Because to me, like how would I describe what that is? Because what's overhyped for someone may be like just the right amount of hype, you know, to get them to buy it.
That's true.
But I think readers like need to find that semblance of honesty and transparency when it comes to the books that we're reading. And I'm taking out like problematic authors and books in general. But like, it's not going to be for everyone, and that's okay. And I think as long as you're honest and respectful in your reviews without inviting the author into that space where they could potentially, you know, get offended or like have their feelings hurt for a moment, that should be like celebrated and championed.
Yeah, I think like with the publishing industry, I think like the internet is a new territory for them. I feel like they never really had to market super hard, like do a lot of digital marketing. So I feel like it's very new, and like understanding that we as readers are also very new to like how we show up online, and like just the whole entire concept of social media is new. And so just being respectful of that, like allowing readers allowing readers the space to share what they want when they want. I think there are a lot of like times where publishers create like these deadlines, or they're asking for reviews on things, and it's just like, I'm doing this for free. I'm doing this for fun. Like, why are you putting all of this pressure on me, as if it doesn't require time and effort for me to really read and enjoy a book? So just allowing readers the opportunity to really enjoy the books that they're sending them without all of this added pressure and like deadlines for things that I'm doing willingly.
Sure.
I think both Chip and Danshe touched on really, really important topics that I've been hearing a lot about in the Bookstagram space recently as well, especially that kind of, it's a reader and reviewer space. Don't tag, kind of etiquette thing. Like, don't tag an author in a negative review. But that being said, like, I also don't think we should just not be posting negative reviews. And to your point, Michael, like, just because we didn't like something doesn't mean that it was inherently bad, or what we're going to say about it is like negative. I do think that's a little bit of a harsh term. Yeah, it is a really interesting space, especially, and I wonder if we all consume Bookstagram in a maybe different way than someone who isn't super involved in the industry is, because like we probably all follow a lot of publishers, Bookstagrammers exclusively. So I feel like I a lot of times see a lot of the same titles, especially around on Tuesdays, on pub days. And I think that kind of thing and that influx can kind of influence the types of books that I might be picking up, which is the book that I recently posted.
When we're done,
you've
got to tell me what that book is.
Yeah, I will. Okay. I mean, it wasn't bad. It wasn't a bad book. I just
wasn't for you. Yeah. I'm backtracking a little bit. Chip, you mentioned like waiting for that viral moment to happen. And so I am wondering for each of you, at what point did you feel like, oh, I am a bookstagrammer, I am an influencer. Like I do have people who are interested in my thoughts.
I think for me, it was like one of the first times that like authors or publishers reached out, like asking me very nervously to read their book or like to promote their book. And I was like, hello, yeah, like give it to me. I'll scream about it forever. And I think just kind of seeing that whole process evolve, where it's like, here's an arc of a book, read it and tell me what you think, posting your review, and then like slowly starting to see all my friends love something that I loved, and then like watching it just grow and grow and grow online, because there are like one or two moments in my Bookstagram career where I'm like, oh, okay, like I feel like I was one of the first people to talk about this book. And now it's like beloved, and that makes me feel awesome. And that's like my little superpower. So that was definitely for me the moment where I was like, all right, I'm doing something right.
Yeah, like that first ask of being an early reader is just like, me? Little old me? Like I still have those moments to this day. And so like before Bookstagram, I didn't even know ARC reading was a thing. I think it was like I started working at Barnes and Noble, and I was in the break room and they was like, oh yeah, you can take these ARCs with you. I'm like, I could take this with me? And it was just
like a crime.
I was like, it's not out yet. I said, I don't think I can do that. They're like, no, you can definitely take it. But I think for me, it was like also that moment. But I think it was like summer 2022 probably. I had like made a reel, like it's always like my reels on a whim, and like Oprah's book club had shared it. It was for Nightcrawling by Layla Motley, and I had like braids, and I just like basically redid the cover because I really loved the book. And I was just like, oh cool, like other people could see me on the internet, and like other people as far as Oprah's book club. Like that was like one of those moments where I was like, okay, like people like to see me, and it's just it's so
That's
warming
awesome.
every time that happens. It's just like, this is cool. Even just a simple like reshare, it means everything to me.
Likewise. I don't know if I can pinpoint a specific moment where I was like, oh, like now people care. But I did have a post last spring, so in 2023, that went pretty viral, and it was a little bit outside of like what my normal content is. I largely post what I like to call silly little reels. And I actually don't post that many reviews in feed. And that's mostly just because I'm an overthinker, and I'm like, I don't know how to say anything eloquent about this book other than I liked it or I didn't.
Sure.
And that's something I'm trying to be better about this year. And I say that every year. This is now my third or fourth year on Bookstagram. But that post, it was like super highly reshared. A lot of people were resonating with it. And the comments, I think whenever I have a post where people are very involved in the comments and the discussion is super thorough, and then sometimes the discussions move from comments to DMs, like that, moments like that, kind of similar to what you were saying, Chip, where you're like, kind of on the opposite side though, because you were saying it was a book you loved, where it's just like, okay, yeah, people do care or people want to engage, and there are people who disagree, but I like reading other people's kind of opinions. And in that same vein, like with that specific post, I was kind of talking about like the overall genre of kind of like sad girl fiction and how it kind of toes the line of maybe heading into a not so great territory. And then people were kind of shouting out other authors who kind of had similar work. And for that reason, kind of on the same vein of the negative review train we were talking about, I kind of appreciate those sides of discussions, so that I know I don't want to waste my time reading a book like that. I know I won't like it. So I find that discourse also very helpful.
Yeah, Janelle, I think I know what you're talking about. That or a book you're referencing right now ish. I think I remember this going kind of big for you, and it actually did, like, it influenced me not to get it. You know what I mean? And it was just a really thoughtful, as you're saying, like, if I'm remembering correctly, the book in question, it wasn't unkind. It was very fair. And that is an interesting place to be with what we do, because like what we do want to just be joyful and share the books that we love. But to your point, yeah, like it was just a moment of like, hi, I see this trend in the industry. I think it might be trending in a negative way. Let's talk about it. It does bode itself to really interesting conversation that doesn't have to be like rife with animosity necessarily. So Chip, you are a published author, and I believe you said in this conversation, correct me if I'm wrong, but like Bookstagram sort of helped you realize like, oh, this is something I could do.
Yeah.
Was writing, have you ever wanted to be a writer before you started to pursue Bookstagram?
Yeah, I feel like that was always like one of those hidden, like, far off dreams that I just decided was never attainable. I was a photojournalist in the Air Force, so I feel like I scratched that itch a little bit by getting to tell those types of like news feature stories. But it really wasn't until I joined Bookstagram and I started sharing more about like my personal life and like my marriage and like things beyond books that people were like, the way that you share about that, like, have you ever considered doing that? And I was like, well, funny you should say that. Like, I've been trying, and I just did it. Like, it truly just gave me the confidence to, like, I had literally nothing to lose. It's not like I was chasing some, big book deal or like trying to submit it to agents. And I just did it all on my own.
But then it led to a traditional published book, correct?
It did, yeah.
Yeah.
Which I literally am still gobsmacked over. Like, I didn't see that coming. So, very, very thankful.
Yeah. So Janelle or Donche, do either of you have writerly ambitions? Do you want to pursue a career in fiction?
I would love to, honestly, one day. But I always feel like I start to think about like a novel I want to write, and I'm like, this is my life. And so it's just like, well, that's not where I wanted it to go. But I think like personally, like something that's really been weighing on me a lot is that I don't see a lot of like bisexual Black main characters, and so like I'm always like longing for that. So if I wrote something ever, it would be along those lines. But I know it's just like something with time. If it's meant to be, it'll happen. And I think every person who's like, I've been a reader my entire life, like even as a child, like our inner child just really wants to write a book. Like we all just want to write a book.
Yes.
And so if I get bit by the writer's bug just from this conversation today coming off of Chip, then I'm gonna thank Chip in my
Do it.
Yeah, this is great inspiration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I completely agree with you because I do have kind of the writer's bug, but like I said, I can't even write a review. So I don't know if I can put pen to paper to put like an actual story together. The thought that's been forming in my head now is kind of like a short story collection.
Yeah.
So it's getting smaller and smaller, but all of my ideas are literally my life. And I'm like, how, like honest, how out there do I really want to put, and kind of like the auto fiction side of things.
Write what you know.
Yeah.
That's what I did.
Yeah. Well, Chip, that leads me to a question is like, do you have any advice for Danshe or Janelle or myself about sort of transitioning from reader to writer?
I'll never think that I'm in a position to give advice because I feel like my head's on fire 24/7. But like the only advice I can give anyone is to just do it and write and see what happens, because I feel like genuinely once you start, it like becomes this snowball effect and like unlocks something inside of you where it's like, no, like I can do this, like I can see this through, and not everyone's gonna like it, not everyone's gonna read it, but I've connected with so many readers who only knew me from reading my book, like they weren't even following my Bookstagram account really, so they didn't know too much about me. And like my very singular and personal life experience that I thought only I had, like I now have a handful of people who have gone through something very similar that I have because we've been connected through this book.
Wow.
And so it was a very healing experience for me. It was a very like proud experience, and I feel like if you have the bug, like there's no harm in just like seeing what comes out of you as you're like giving yourself the grace and the space to, Danshe, like you said, like the Black bisexual character, like that's your story to tell, and no one else can tell it like you can, so I think if you want to read that book, write the book you want to read. That's very cliche.
It's
just
endlessly true.
It's so true, and I hear it all the time. And it's just like every time someone tells me that, like I'll probably get off here and like write a sentence. But like
there you go.
Oh, truly. Yes. Well, this has been so lovely.
This was great.
I'm really, really lucky to have chatted with all of you, and I feel really thankful and honored. So thank you so much for sitting down with Writer's Digest today. I know our listeners will really take something from this as well.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for listening to Writer's Digest Presents. Join us next month where we'll be in conversation with WD's self-published book winner Zenda Walker about her book being recently republished and landing a 2-book deal. Until then, you can find us online at writersdigest.com or follow us on social media at Writer's Digest.